George, we're going to do something in the winter accommodation now. So when was this built, or what's its history?
So here, this dairy site was made in 2001. And before that, it was the beef unit on this estate. So the parlour building and I guess what we would call our carving shed were pre-existing beef units. And then in 2001, they built a 250 cow cubicle shed, slurry lagoon, and retrofitted a parlour into a beef shed. So, in 2001, this would have been this is still a good cubicle shed.
Yeah.
2001, it would have been
Serious.
next level.
Yeah.
So it was 250 cubicles with a feed passage, just a normal feed passage down the middle.
Yeah.
And then in 2019, I guess it was almost 20 years old, the dairy was needing some reinvestment, and we were looking at what the business was going to look like going forwards. One thing led to another. Well,
George got carried away.
yeah, we wanted to calve less cows in the spring. We wanted to calve more cows in the autumn to avoid these dry summers. Self-feeding enabled us to feed cows quite efficiently through the winter, and it enabled us to take feeding out of the shed and put another 100 and something cubicles in. So we now have like a 365 cow cubicle shed with self-feeding for 400 cows. So it kind of works quite well. We bought second-hand cubicles and mats from a dairy that was getting out. That was a great way of saving money, but the mats weren't comfy enough and the cows didn't lie on them. So we then ripped out those mats and put expensive comfy mats in. But hey ho. We were these are nice wide passages because they were once feed passages. But I suppose with self-feeding, like the cows are lazy, aren't they? They'll come in from their feed and they naturally fill up the cubicle shed from the side closer to the feed. So we were desperate to get comfy mats further across the shed to pull the cows in.
Okay. So Jimmy, what's the bedding routine?
We bed up 3 times a week with sawdust and lime. Scrape beds off twice a day when you scrape up. Just clean them up, and then we just use it's actually a concrete rake, because it's lightweight and it's easy to use, to flick the sawdust. And so you just go along here, clean it all off, and then just flick the sawdust over the top just to make a nice new comfy bed for them.
Yeah. So George, you were saying you've obviously a lot of autumns calved now.
Yeah.
So they're dedicated to this. The springs don't come in.
Yeah. So in the autumn, the springs can't be housed.
Yeah.
So springs stay out full time.
Yeah.
Until the first half of them get dried off in early December, the second half get dried off end of December, just before Christmas. So we have to be quite careful of making sure we build covers in September to keep cows out, springs out full time.
Yeah.
Like that winter milk is really valuable, and it's really expensive to dry the cows off early. So the springs have to graze, right up into December.
Yeah.
And then in the springtime, so we have 365 cubicles. In the springtime, once the cows get going calving, once the springs start calving, there has to then be cows grazing again. So we start calving 1st of Feb, which means we start grazing by the 5th of Feb.
Yeah.
But what we do in the spring is we just juggle it. So we have the autumns inside at night, and housed at night and grazing in the day, and then the springs are housed in the day and out at night. So in the autumn, one herd is housed full time, one herd is out full time, because that housed herd, we're trying to get them in calf. In the spring, we just juggle through this shed to mean that each herd gets a chance to fill up on silage, lay in a comfy bed, and then goes out grazing. There are, like any grazing system, there are days in February where it's a bit tricky, but that is block calving, right?
Yeah.
You have a bit of pressure, and then you get over it.
Yeah.
And then you get a nice sunny day in October, and you forget about your woes.
So I guess that's where the split calving works for you as well. You see an advantage in that
Totally.
you're really sweating the acid here.
Totally.
With your autumns versus your spring.
Totally. And then, so the dairy was designed, in 2000 by a guy called Andrew Galloway, who kind of led the building project here. And I think it's like an absolute testament to him that 20 years on, with quite a different system, it's actually still a remarkably easy unit to operate. It's really well designed. He nailed it. He did a great job. We've just tinkered with silage clamps and stuff.
Yeah.
A few tracks and bits and pieces.
So the question might be asked, why don't you build an extra 200 cubicles?
Because how much will that cost me?
Yeah.
So as a grazing farmer, the fashionable thing, isn't it, is to do one block, because because we all say that's simple and makes us efficient. Probably the challenge is that winter housing and feeding for 200 cows is going to cost, it's like £2,000 a cow. You'd spend £2,000 a cow all in. So we spend 400 grand, and I don't think we end up making any more money.
Okay.
I think the 600 split cows actually enables us to sweat the infrastructure we've got, graze the grass.
Yeah.
It's like it's grazing grass that drives the profit, isn't it? It's not housing cows. So with split calving, we can do that quite effectively.
Yeah.
And we have, the key thing for us was just being able to de-stock in the summer when we
Being
got dry.
versatile,
Yeah, and crikey, there's nothing more versatile than a split block.
And there was a lot of money being spent making bales, wasn't there,
Yeah.
on water meadows when we could graze dry stock on it instead.
Yeah.
So just make the most of what you've got, basically.
Yes.
Yeah.
So as we're here, we might just have a look at your slurry management. So all your slurries coming back here, Jimmy.
Sorry?
All your slurries coming back here to this point here.
Yeah, so what was put in from Andrew's days, they put a channel that runs from the end of the well, it runs from right down the end of the yard there, but it comes in the end of the shed here and effectively runs parallel. It runs into this channel here. So we've just tapped into the existing slurry lagoon,
Yeah.
slurry channel, sorry, and runs back to this reception pit, goes through a pump into the tank.
Yeah.
We're quite fortunate, so we've got it set up so that with that pump you can change a lever and you can circulate slurry back up through the channels to flush it out. That
Okay.
works quite well.
Yeah.
And then we've got this store, and we've got planning consent to build another store next to it and cover both, and then that will give us 6 months fully covered storage.
Okay.
That's probably like the final bit of capex to do, to kind of hopefully set us up for 20 years, I guess.
Yes. So all the slurries then spread in contract, is it?
All slurry is spread by contractors.
Yeah.
We used to do some of that ourselves.
Yeah, there's kit to do it, but
I didn't buy a big enough tractor.
yeah, and it all needed a lot of work, didn't it? So yeah, you can go so far to spend money just for the sake of spending it,
Yeah.
can't you? So,
And I suppose, George, you're focused on return on capital. You know, you'd love maybe an extra 200 cubicles, but you know, you'd have an obligation then to contribute to make that pay.
Yeah, so in our agreement, in our contract farming agreement that we have here, any capital that is employed in the business, whether that's in livestock, machinery, buildings, milking parlours, all gets a 10% return paid on it. So great, we crack on and spend 400k, but it costs the dairy then 40k a year to service that as a return.
Yeah.
So we just have to be so careful not to overcapital. Like, we can overcapitalize a business and absolutely strangle the profit out of it. And that is so easily done because it's so fun building stuff, right? It's fun building stuff. It's nice having a well put together farm, but we have to be careful about overcapitalizing.
Yeah.
And that contract farming agreement probably encourages quite a lot of discipline for that.
Yeah. So you're focused then maybe on cows and
Yeah.
high return areas or
Totally.
whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like genetics and grazing. That's what drives profit in a grazing system. Yeah, totally.
So Jimmy, what's this channel here then? Say or this area here then
so
for?
this is a exit from the parlour, and we can now use it quite versatilely. So we can send cows down to the far end of the cubicle shed to bring them into the. So it's very versatile, like the cow flow situation. So we can send cows down to the far end of the cubicle shed, or we can bring them out here through the backyard
Yeah.
to send them out for grazing.
Okay.
It makes it quite easy. You have a bit of a roundabout system going with cows, with sort of spring cows coming in, autumn cows going through the top of the shed, but it just flows. It just shows like good design and being well thought
parallel.
out. It just we've got several sets of gates here that we can just send them whichever way we need to. Really.
Yes.
It was a guy from Grass Tech about 10 or 15 years ago, but I couldn't necessarily tell you who it was, said that when you're designing farmyards, you just have to keep putting stuff in parallel. And that is so true.
Yeah.
Like, as soon as you start doing things perpendicular to each other, it gets
Yeah.
really
You
confused.
get
and
snookered, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. And using falls as well, and
totally.
yeah. Great.